Today's book review will focus on Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. It is Weir's fourth novel, if we include Theft of Pride in this list, and it is a 476-page long standalone science fiction story that was published in the year 2021. Project Hail Mary is set in a not too distant future, and it can be considered to be reasonably hard science fiction. Compared to Weir's previous novels, Artemis and The Martian, Project Hail Mary is his novel with the most elaborate world building and scope of the story. However, compared to other authors, this is still a very focused book, as we will discuss later in the video in way more detail. This is also apparent from the amount of main characters, which is roughly a dozen, with a single point of view character, and thus Project Hail Mary is very similar to Artemis and The Martian in this respect. In terms of original and unique ideas, Project Hail Mary has a lot to offer, and it is definitely one of its strong points. Due to Project Hail Mary also being on this hard side of the sci-fi Mohs scale, some of these unique aspects introduced in the novel result in some interesting and intriguing consequences and plot developments. As the story unfolds, every event and decision has its own logic to it. As the award season of 2022 has not ended yet, it is not really possible to give a final number with regards to total nominations and awards for the book. As of now, in the second half of 2022, Project Hail Mary has won 4 awards though. Furthermore, the popular reception of Project Hail Mary is quite positive, as evidenced by the scores on sites like Goodreads, Library Thing or Amazon. It boasts a combined score of 4.5 out of 5 stars based on 10,000 of reviews and ratings. Similar to The Martian and Artemis, there are already talks of a movie adaptation of Project Hail Mary. Indeed, once more, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who are also working on an adaptation of Artemis, are supposed to produce and direct the movie for Project Hail Mary. Interestingly enough, famous actor Ryan Gosling plans to star as the protagonist. We will have to wait and see how this all will unfold in the future though. The story of Project Hail Mary consists of 2 timelines that are told in parallel. In the first one, the protagonist, Ryland Grace, wakes up alone on the interstellar spaceship Hail Mary on an important mission to avert a world-ending threat to humanity. However, there are several problems. He has no recollection of who he is, let alone what the specific objectives of his mission are. His 2 crewmates are dead, and any round-trip communication with Earth will take years, if it is successful at all. The secondary plot line can be thought of as flashbacks that Ryland Grace has throughout the main and primary plot about the Hail Mary, and that allow him, and therefore also the reader, to gradually make sense of his situation, his mission, and how everything led up to Project Hail Mary in the first place. Therefore, this second plotline is centered on Earth before the Hail Mary takes off. In general, Project Hail Mary is more in the spirit of The Martian than Artemis was. Especially the primary plot frequently requires Ryland Grace to come up with scientific and engineering solutions to keep the ship going, stay alive, and to overcome other obstacles. In addition, Ryland Grace as a protagonist is probably the most developed and nuanced character in the works of Andy Weir. In contrast to Mark Watney, the famous protagonist, botanist/engineer of The Martian, Ryland Grace does experience internal struggles. His backstory indicates that he may have not achieved his true potential in his earlier life and career before the events of the book, and he is more akin to the reluctant hero or even anti-hero trope. The world that Andy Weir sets up could be quite intriguing, however we only get glimpses of it, as most of the story takes place in interstellar space on the Hail Mary, and the secondary plot only hints at massive societal, economic and political changes on Earth, which certainly would have been exacerbated further once the secondary plot reaches the beginning of the primary plot. Yet, as readers, we do not experience the hardship on Earth. There are also some other minor shortcomings to the novel in my view as well. However, as they contain some spoilers, you may listen to my argument at your own peril. So beware. For one, the secondary plot on Earth is probably the weaker of the two, and it certainly contains most of the problematic story elements, at least in my view. First, the parts where Ryland is investigating astrophage, the alien microorganism that induced a reduction of the sun's luminosity, which will likely cause a new ice age in a couple of decades, comes off as quite sterile. In such a situation, I would expect that a whole army of scientists, engineers and technicians would work on the problem, even if they would be exposed to increased risks. The argument that Ryland worked on this task mostly isolated because he was seen as expendable does not really convince me. Similarly, the events that lead up to Ryland being on the Hail Mary, specifically the genetic prerequisites for interstellar travel, are more convenient from a plot perspective rather than convincing. In such a situation, it would have been likely to train as many potential candidates for the mission as possible, not just 2 teams. Secondly, Eva Strutt, as supreme dictator that can order politicians and generals from any nation on Earth around, also strains the suspension of disbelief quite a bit. This could have been mitigated had we seen more opposition to her and how she is able to resolve or even break any kind of resistance. In addition, how such apocalyptic news can gradually lead to a breakdown of society, its institutions, and how it ultimately will affect each individual person was only briefly mentioned, on occasion, if at all. Granted, that aspect was not the main point of Project Hail Mary. For that, more dystopic novels, such as Seven Eves by Neil Stephenson, are more appropriate. The final point in this spoiler section will be related to the alien Rocky that Ryland encounters in the primary plotline. Overall, I did like the interaction between the two, and indeed how detailed Rocky's physiology, psychology, and culture are described, and how these aspects tend to influence each other. A rather small caveat that I had was that Rocky seemed a bit too close to a human-like psychology and thus behavior, especially if we compared Rocky's motivations to the quote-unquote truly alien motivations that are described in other science fiction novels, such as in the Commonwealth Saga by Peter F. Hamilton, in Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, or in John Scalzi's Old Man's War. But to reiterate, these are minor points of criticism. All in all, Project Hail Mary is Andy Weir at his best. Thus, this novel will certainly scratch the itch for a focused, tightly written hard science fiction novel that you may have been left with after finishing The Martian. I would even argue that it surpasses The Martian with regards to the depth of the characters and the amount of original and unique ideas. Certainly, Project Hail Mary was a page-turner. It kept me entertained, and it was captivating, gripping, and I never felt that there were longer meandering parts that bored me. I can therefore wholeheartedly recommend Project Hail Mary. If you liked this video, you may also enjoy the other reviews and content on my channel. Feel free to leave a comment if you want to discuss the novels or if you want to suggest other books that I should review in the future. Please consider upvoting and subscribing, it is much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and until next time.